The Atlanta Braves have done a great job drafting and developing pitching talent the last several years, but it was very important for them this past offseason to go out and acquire some quality depth in the rotation and in the bullpen. And I think Alex Anthopoulos has done that. On today's positional preview, we'll look at the pitching staff for the Atlanta Braves and why I think it could be one of the best in baseball in 2024. We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you check out some of my written work over at BravesToday.com. Make sure you follow the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. If you are new, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We kind of stalled out here, a little around 9,200 subscribers. We're trying to get to 10K by opening day. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. If you already have, hit that thumbs up button so others can see the show and hopefully subscribe and help us get there by opening day. If you're listening on audio, I'd appreciate a 5-star review, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, wherever it may be. Thank you so much for all support you give me here at Locked On Braves. All my everydayers out there. We got several people already in the live chat here. CJ Palmer, Phil, Ecuadorman, Laves, Chris Fields, Volt66, War Eagle to you, Sean Finley. Let's get into it. Cody Cooper, Nick C, Brian Willits, Nick Harvey, Jeffrey Humphreys, Alan Daniel, Cody Cooper, Leland Hurt, David McIntyre, George Guerrero, Nick C. Thank you all so much for joining here live. I know we'll have some others joining as well throughout the show. And it is our positional preview, our final positional preview. We're looking at the pitching, both starting and relieving. So we got a lot to cover in today's episode. And then later in the episode, want to get into the split squad games from Thursday, which saw the Braves take home a couple of wins, some good pitching performances as well. And Forrest Wall, boy, what he is doing right now in spring training, making it really, really difficult for that bench battle that is going on. Before we get into all that, though, I want to let you know this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So today is our positional preview episode for the pitching. We're going to cover starters and relievers. Like I said, we have a lot to get to on today's podcast. Let's start off kind of like we've done throughout the week, taking a look back. Last year, Braves starting pitching staff ranked 9th in F4 in all of baseball at 11.7. Phillies were best in all of baseball at 17.7, followed by the Twins, Rays, Padres, Mariners, Blue Jays, Rangers, and Cubs. Braves starters were actually 17th in ERA, but 10th in FIP, fielding independent pitching there. So that typically means when you see the FIP, lower than the actual ERA, typically means that the pitchers were a bit unlucky. Also could do with maybe not having the best defense behind them either. And I've talked about it when we went over the infield preview. I think the infield has a lot of work to do defensively, particularly on the right side of the infield with Olsen, and Ozzie was not really good last year. Infield defense needs to be better, and that's partially why I think the Braves' ERA was so inflated compared to their FIP last year. But still, in F4 at least, a top 10 rotation in baseball last season, and that's with two major injuries in the rotation. You lose Max Fried, who looked fantastic when he was healthy last year. You lose Kyle Wright, who was a 20-game winner the year before. That's some pretty big losses to your rotation. It seemed like they never could find anybody to cover that fifth spot. Number of pitchers that they used last year, they used 16 starters last season. Now, 3 of those were openers and Colin McHugh, Dylan Lee, and Jesse Chavez. So take those out, essentially use 13 legitimate starters last season. 11 of those starters made at least 5 starts. So you had a lot of starters making multiple starts last year. they couldn't, like I said, they couldn't find anyone to grab that fifth spot in the rotation, and it was a problem all year long, running out Michael Soroka, running out Yanni Chirinos and others. Strider, Morton, and Elder held it down all season long. They all made 30-plus starts, but nobody else made more than 15. Fried had the next most with 14. So it was a struggle last year finding starts, and luckily the Braves had the depth and they had the offense to cover it. But despite all that, still, in the top 10 in FanGraphs WAR by Braves starting pitchers last year. A lot of that had to do with the first half of Bryce Elder, how great that he was. Obviously, Spencer Strider, even with his ERA, what doesn't really show or quantify just how good he was, Braves still had a really good pitching staff. And a lot of that had to do with their depth, which I think is still even better this year now because they have the experience from last year. But let's get into the starting rotation because, like I said, we're going to do rotation and bullpen separately on this podcast, so a lot to talk about. Spencer Strider at the top. He is the preseason Cy Young favorite. You go by our friends over at FanDuel. They have him as the NL Cy Young favorite right now. Some of the questions for Spencer Strider this year: can he reach 300 strikeouts? Finished with 281 last year, a little over 180 innings pitched. Can he get to 300 strikeouts? Certainly something to watch for. How effective can this curve be? I think that's going to be big for him as well. I see Brian Willits coming in the chat talking about the curveball from Spencer Strider. Saw it again on Thursday. Can that be a new wrinkle for him to get people off, the fastball slider? As good as those pitches are, you can be looking for them and still not hit them. But, if you do go up there and guess right and he misses location, he's going to give up some home runs. And that's certainly something he struggled with last year. And I think if you're looking for improvements for Spencer Strider and what's going to get him that Cy Young, can he avoid the home runs, especially late in outings where it seemed like he got punished last year? He had a 6.52 ERA in the 7th inning last season. If he doesn't pitch beyond the 6th inning last year, if Snicker just takes him out every time after the 6th inning, he likely runs away with the Cy Young Award because the only thing holding him back was the high 3s ERA that he had. But he has to get better at that, and he has to be able to go deeper into games and go 7 innings regularly. And that's what you hope to see from Spencer Strider in 2024, and avoiding those long balls and avoiding those innings that just kind of spiral on him like it did last year. A bloop hit, a walk, and then a home run. Seemed like it happened a lot to Spencer Strider last season to blow up what was otherwise just dominant outings. But Cy Young favorite, very excited about the year coming up for Spencer Strider and very excited to see what that curveball can do. Max Fried, the only questions for him in my mind are, can he stay healthy? I said this last year, at the beginning of the season. I said, even when I just saw his first couple of starts, I said, this is the best I've ever seen Max Fried. He was so dialed in. He was doing such a great job commanding all of his pitches, keeping hitters off balance. And look, the injury issues he had last year, they are scary. They are some scary injuries. But when he came back, he still looked just as good. So when he's healthy, I still think he is one of the best pitchers in baseball. I think he's a Cy Young contender. It's just, can he stay healthy? And I see the question from Sean Finley, the question a lot of people are having: who starts on opening day, Strider or Fried? I'm a little bit old school in this. I love the fact that Julio Teheran started every opening day for a long time. I just thought that was cool. I give it to Max Fried as the veteran. Very well could be his last year in Atlanta. Spencer Strider, in my mind, is the better pitcher. So I could understand wanting to give him the opening day nod, but I probably give it to Max Fried if I'm the manager, just because he has been there longer. He is the veteran. I would probably give it to Max Fried, but it doesn't really matter either way. And we'll see what happens. I mean, Strider pitched the first game of spring training, if you want to look anything into that, but either way, it's not a bad option. Next up in the rotation is Chris Sale, and same question for him as with Max Fried. Can he stay healthy? The metrics from last year, you look at Chris Sale, they show that he's still really, really good. A nearly 40% whiff rate on his slider. That fastball still in the mid-90s. It's one outing in spring training, but he looked really, really good. I'm excited about Chris Sale, what he can bring. And I just think if he stays healthy, I think he's going to be one of the better number 3 starters in all of baseball. Charlie Morton, getting up there in age. There's certainly been some regression the last few years. He had a 3.64 ERA last year. That is the best among that group of he and Strider and Elder. Despite the all-star level first half that Bryce Elder had, despite Spencer Strider striking out everybody in the world, Charlie Morton had the best ERA out of all of those guys. Now, that came with a 1.43 whip. In case you're not familiar with whip totals and what's good and what's not good, that is not good. 1.43 is not a good whip, and points to the fact that he probably should have given up a lot more runs. Now, what he did better in 2023 and why that ERA is not as high is he did a much better job of limiting the home runs, which is the issue that he had in 2022. So if he can continue to limit the home runs, if he can avoid the walks, you could see a path for a really good year for Charlie Morton, who still struck out, I want to say, over 180 batters last year. So still great strikeout stuff. That curveball is still really good. A lot of big strikeout potential with Charlie Morton. And again, we're talking about if everybody's healthy, a number 4 starter in your rotation. I like Charlie Morton. I do think there is some regression coming, but I think you're penciling him in as your 4th starter in the rotation. Last up in the rotation, I'm putting Ronaldo Lopez there to start the year. I just think the Braves signed this guy to stretch him out as a starter. Elder, Vines, others have options. You can option them down and keep them as depth. I think if you're going to stretch out Lopez in spring training, as long as he doesn't fall flat on his face, you might as well give him the job to start the year and see how he does. And you can always transition him back to the bullpen. My question with Lopez is, can he maintain that velocity? I've talked about this with him before. Can he hold that velocity in outings as a starter that he had as a reliever? Is the changeup a good enough third offering for him to keep hitters off his 4-seam and slider? Look, those are good pitches. He's not Spencer Strider. You're going to have a third quality pitch if you're going to be able to go through a lineup 2 or 3 times. So that's the big questions with Ronaldo Lopez. My concern is I don't know that you get a long enough look in spring training to answer those questions. But I am already going way over here. So I'm going to go through the rest of this rotation depth, which I think is really good. Bryce Elder, I think he probably makes 15 or more starts this year, even if he isn't in the rotation to begin the season. I want to see what he learned from his success and his failure in 2023. He has to live on the margins. He has to have great command. But I still think he's a very solid back of the rotation pitcher. And I think he's going to pitch a lot of innings for the Braves in 2023, whether he makes the opening day rotation or not. And sorry, I meant 2024. Darius Vines, 3.98 ERA last year, a 1.08 whip, just 20 1/3 innings. But he was impressive when called upon last season. Similar to Elder, relies on command, keeping hitters off balance. He'll have some good starts. He'll probably have some stinkers in there as well where he can't get through 5 innings, but it's quality depth in your rotation. AJ Smith-Shawver, we talked about him on yesterday's episode. You want to go back and listen to that. Can he command the breaking pitches better? Can he maintain that fastball velocity for 5 or 6 innings? Those are the remaining questions for me for AJ Smith-Shawver. If he can do those things, he's a legit middle rotation, possibly number 2 starter. Dylan Todd, what does he look like trying to rebound from a disastrous 2023? Hurston Waldrop, can he impress enough in camp and possibly early in the minor league season to eventually cement himself in the big league rotation? And the only real question for Waldrop is command. Can he command all of his pitches and throw enough strikes to be effective? He can do that. I have no doubt he can succeed at the big league level. You have Alan Winans, kind of similar to Vines. He had some good starts last year. And then Ian Anderson getting back midseason. I don't know how much to expect from him, but that's a pretty good depth at starting pitching going into a season when you're most likely going to use at least 11 or 12 starters throughout the season. This is why the Braves are so great in the regular season and why you have a lot of confidence that they can make the postseason, because they have a ton of depth in the pitching department to cover 162 games a year. And with that offense, give them a chance to win. So I love the starting pitching depth for the Braves. I'm really excited to see what young guys like AJ Smith-Shawver and Hurston Waldrop can do for sure. But as good as the rotation depth is, the bullpen depth might be even better, especially with the additions made this offseason. We'll talk about those here next. You shouldn't have to worry when buying tickets to the next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You get the view from your seat right there in the app, so you know what your view looks like before you buy your ticket. All-in prices show you total upfront cost. Absolutely love that feature with Game Time. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's a place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash sales, sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, we've gotten through our positional previews this week. We went over infield on Tuesday, outfield Wednesday. We're going over pitching now. Tomorrow, we will have our weekly mailbag episode, so get your questions ready for that. And on Monday, we'll look at the prospect who has the most on the line in spring training, and that prospect may just have pitched on Thursday. We'll discuss that a little bit later. But let's get into our pitching preview because we got a lot of ground to cover here. Looking at last year, the Braves bullpen was 10th in F-WAR at 5 total F-WAR. Dodgers, Orioles, Phillies, Marlins, Reds, Mariners, Giants, Rays, and Blue Jays were ahead of them. They were 11th in ERA, but 7th in FIP. Again, bullpen, just like the starting rotation, underperformed based on their FIP. Some bad luck, maybe some bad defense mixed in there. But what I love about the bullpen from last year, they were 4th in K per 9, 7th in walk per 9. That is exactly what you want out of your bullpen. And I think Alex has done a great job of targeting pitchers who have high strikeout rates with low walk rates. You don't want a reliever coming in and walking the world and can't get themselves out of it with a strikeout. I think he's done a great job of getting those arms. Braves used 24 pitchers as relievers last year, but that includes Michael Soroka, AJ Smith-Shawver, Colby Allard, Darius Vines, Nicky Lopez, and Colby Allard. So you take that out, 18 traditional relievers is what the Braves needed last year. 13 had double-digit appearances, 8 made 35 or more. So you're really looking for a solid group of 12 to 13 relievers that you feel confident in throughout the season. And I think the Braves have that. Starts with closer Raisel Iglesias. I forgot he missed April last year and he still got 33 saves. 4 straight years now, he's had an ERA between 2.47 and 2.75, so that's pretty consistent. However, I don't want to raise any red flags on Raisel Iglesias, but I will point out last year is the highest whip at 1.19, which is still really solid, and average against at 238. It's the highest whip and a batting average against total he's had since 2019. His K percentage also dipped under 30% for the first time since 2018. It was just 29.4, but it was under 30. And his walk rate was the highest it's been since 2019. He's 35 years old, getting up there in age, possibly some regression coming. His sinker was not nearly as effective last year as it's been in the past. It had a -9 run value. According to Baseball Savant, it was +2 in 2022, and batters hit .519 against his sinker with a .704 slug last year. He just turned 34. I'm sorry, I said 35. He just turned 34. He's under contract for 2 more years at $16 million per year. I still think he's going to be a solid closer. I think he's going to be fine. Do not be surprised if we perhaps see some more regression from Raisel Iglesias, and maybe he's a little bit more shaky this year than what you're accustomed to. It's, Father Time catches up with all of us. There's some signs from last year pointing to regression coming. I think you can say the same for AJ Minter. I hate to start off this bullpen segment talking about some guys that maybe I think are regressing, but the cutter's just not as effective as it was in the past for AJ Minter. I think he needs to feature the four-seamer more. I wrote an article on this last year on BravesToday.com. I talked about it a lot on this podcast. That cutter, when it was over the plate last year, got absolutely hammered. He either needs to work on the changeup more and make it more of a go-to pitch, or he's got to feature that four-seamer a lot more and throw that cutter out of the zone. Anytime I saw the cutter over the plate last year, I cringed because it just felt like it got rocked every single time. That said, about AJ, I think he's going to be a fine setup man and may even get a chance at closing some games out. It's also a contract year for AJ Minter, so I hope he has a great year, and whether it's with the Braves or somebody else, gets the bag that he deserves. Now, the Braves brought back Pierce Johnson and Joe Jimenez, who were great last year. Pierce Johnson, after he came over to Atlanta, 0.76 ERA, 0.887 whip in 23 2/3 innings. Kind of similar to when the Braves got Iglesias at the deadline the year before. I mean, he was just lights out coming over. Pierce Johnson was that. After coming over to Atlanta, his walk percentage dropped significantly and his curveball usage went up a ton. So clearly the Braves identified something in him, helped turn things around and turn him into one of the best relievers in baseball. Joe Jimenez, it was a weird 2023. He had offseason surgery last year. Took him a while to kind of get back up to speed, had a slow start. But once he did, he was good and finished really strong. The numbers were great. A 3.04 ERA, a 1.15 whip, 73 strikeouts, and 56 1/3 innings. It still felt like Snitker never fully trusted him. It felt like he didn't go to him a ton in high leverage situations. It felt like Pierce Johnson got those calls later in the year. It just felt like there wasn't a great amount of trust in Joe Jimenez, but they signed him back. So obviously they see something in him. It'll be curious to see how Snitker uses him in 2024. Aaron Bummer, looking for a bounce back year. He had a 6.79 ERA last year, but an expected ERA of 3.58, an expected batting average of just 2.19. He needs to bring the walk rate down. I talked earlier about the fact I love this bullpen because it has a bunch of guys who throw strikes and don't walk batters. Bummer is somebody that when he is struggling, he will walk the house. That cannot happen. 13.5% walk rate last year. It's been around 12% in 3 of the last 4 seasons. Got to get that under 10%, but he does carry a 30% strikeout rate, which helps him get out of those situations. And it's a devastating sweeper from a weird arm angle, and he is really tough on lefties. Lefties are hitting 199 against him in his career, but they did hit 231 against him last year. So recognize he is looking for a bounce back year, but when he's good, he can be really, really good. Lower leverage arms include Tyler Matzik. Can he get back to 2021 elite levels? What does the velo look like? There's a little bit of confusion on an article from Mark Bowman who said he was 88, 89 in his most recent outing. He corrected that and said he was 91, 95. That still is not great. You need to see mid-90s from Tyler Matzik, but he's working his way back. Going to be in some lower leverage situations to begin the season if he doesn't start the year on a rehab assignment. Ken Giles, I think he is 2024's version of Nick Anderson, a veteran who's been really good in the past, looking to rebound. Certainly after his first spring outing, he looks really, really good and like he has a good chance to make this bullpen. Fastball velo isn't what it once was, but still mid-90s with a devastating slider. I think Ken Giles, I'm not expecting him to be a big setup guy unless some injuries happen and he needs to fill in that role, but I think he could be really, really good in the middle innings for the Braves. Huascar Ynoa, how quickly can he shake off the rust? Does it make sense to start him out of the bullpen as a multi-inning reliever? We obviously haven't seen him yet, but I think that could be a good path for Ynoa. If you want that multi-inning guy, that Josh Tomlin type of role, that Jesse Chavez type of role, I think Ynoa could be a good fit for that while you continue to work him back slowly and stretch him out. Now, the depth in the bullpen. Ray Kerr, who didn't have a good outing on Thursday, he has a minor league option left. And this is something that's great about the Braves bullpen depth this year. They have so many arms with minor league options. Ray Kerr being one of those. Lefties hit just 161 against him last year. Dylan Lee looking for a bounce back year after injuries kind of ruined his 2023. still has 2 minor league options left, more left-handed depth. Daysbel Hernandez has 3 minor league options left. Big stuff, needs to improve on the command. You got Jackson Stevens. He can be your mop-up guy, multi-innings guy. He can do whatever. He is that Josh Tomlin role guy that can do whatever for you. He's on a split contract, so somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he can be sent down to the minors without fear of him losing him. He just can't be removed from the 40-man roster, and he earns a bigger salary each day that he is in the big leagues. And then you also got Penn Murphy coming back mid-season. He has 3 minor league options left. He'll start the year on the injured list. When healthy, he's had a 2.99 and a 1.29 ERA the last 2 seasons at the big league level with the Mariners. This could be a big boost for the bullpen come mid-season. So there are a lot of arms there. And again, if Elder, Waldrop, AJ Smith-Shawver, somebody steps up in the rotation and you push Lopez back to this bullpen, it just makes it even more scarier to deal with. So I think Alex Anthopoulos has done a fantastic job creating depth in the Braves pitching staff. Obviously, injuries to pitchers, they're coming. You got to prepare for them, and that's why you need to have plenty of depth, and I think the Braves have just that. We'll talk about some of those pitchers, including Spencer Strider and Dylan Dodd, who had some good outings on Thursday's spring training games. We'll discuss all of that next. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can use their very easy, user-friendly app, or head on over to FanDuel.com/locked-on. If you're really into spring training games, you know what? They got money lines on that as well. And if you're looking to get into some futures bets for Major League Baseball season coming up, right now the Dodgers are your World Series favorites, just edging out the Braves. One of my favorites that I talk about on here, the over-under on home runs for Acuna, 37.5. Again, I keep telling you, I just can't imagine if he's healthy all year with the swing that he had to end 2023. I just can't imagine him not getting over 40 home runs again. And the win total for the Braves right now is 101.5. So you can see all that over on FanDuel.com/locked-on. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Want to remind you again that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, getting to the 2 games on Thursday, Strider's outing. It's funny for me watching Spencer Strider's outing, and I was kind of doing some other things and watching. I thought he was struggling with command. He looked frustrated at times to me. And then I look up at the end of his outing, and it's 5 strikeouts over 3 scoreless innings. That's just how good he is. A couple of strikeouts on that curveball, which to me, I don't know how they're defining these things, but it looks like a sweeper, more of a sweeper than it's not a 12-6 curveball. It looks like it's got some more horizontal tilt to it. But either way, it's pretty devastating. Pitching Ninja put up an overlay with his fastball and that curveball, and it's just, I don't know how anybody hits a baseball. Aaron Bummer was impressive in his first spring outing. Hitters in the Twins game, Acuna had a double. Michael Harris is red hot to start spring training, had 2 more hits. Riley, a couple of nice opposite field swings, and then just missed smashing a home run to the pool side. That is great to see. He's covering all fields. Eli White, 2 more hits as he tries to make some noise for that bench job. Dylan Dodd in the other game. Didn't get to see it, but 2 perfect innings with 2 strikeouts. Good to see. We know he can pitch in spring training. Need him to put it together in the regular season. Other pitches versus the Rays, I mentioned Ray Kerr, 1 inning, 3 hits, 2 runs, did have 2 strikeouts, but not the outing he was looking for. And Charlie Culberson got his first action on the mound this spring, gave up a hit in a scoreless frame, didn't strike out anybody either, but good to see Charlie out there getting some innings in spring training. Hitters for the Rays, Forrest Wall, a pair of 3-run homers. What do you do with this guy? And here's the question for the Braves. Wall and Eli White right now look like the favorites based on results. that deserve a spot on the roster. But do you want to carry those guys who are going to play sparingly? Or do you want to send them down to AAA and keep them fresh so that if there's an injury, they're ready to go? That's a tough decision because, again, if you carry those guys on the roster, they're just not going to play. They maybe get a pinch hit appearance every now and then, may get a random start every now and then, may get a pinch running spot every now and then. They're just not going to play a lot. And so that's the big decision for the Braves. Kelenic got his first hit of the spring. Ozuna was 3 for 3 with a home run. And Zach Eflin, started this game for the Rays. He's a very good pitcher. I didn't recognize any of the arms after that. David Fletcher was 3 for 4. Phillip Evans had 3 hits. It was a big day offensively over there for the Braves. Bryce Elder gets to start on Friday. Also want to mention Hayden Harris and Taylor Widener were reassigned to minor league camp. Was not impressed with Hayden Harris in my look on Wednesday. And to be fair, it's not much of a look, but I really was intrigued to see what he could do and just wasn't overly impressed. I thought Widener might get more of a look as a long reliever, but I think they have plenty of candidates for that role. Be interested to see if they stretch out Taylor Widener as a potential starter to give them more depth there. He made 20 starts in Korea last year. So somewhat interested to see what happens there. I mean, I don't think it'll play a huge role in 2024, but could add some more depth to the starting rotation. And our countdown to opening day, 28 days. That number is currently worn by Matt Olson. Was worn by Hector Oliveira from 2015 to 2016 in an era of Braves baseball that Benny liked to try to forget. Some other fun names: Joey Turdoslavich, Julio Lugo, Rick Ankiel, Bob Wickman, Joey Devine, and Ryan Langerhans also wore that number in the early 2000s. Gerald Perry wore it from 1983 to 1989, made an all-star appearance in 1988, my birth year. So we are 28 days away from opening day. Thank you all so much for joining me here again. Tomorrow we'll have our mailbag episode. Look for a tweet from _Braves. Submit your question to that tweet to be answered. And then on Minors Monday, we'll look at the prospect who has the most on the line. Shout out to Sean Finley, Leland, Little Lee, Jeffrey, Brian Willits, Dred, Scott, Lav S, making it here till the end of the podcast with me. Thank you so much. Steve Miguel in there, Andrew Holt as well, Doc's Cards making an appearance, Waylon Mercy. Thanks so much for joining me here live on the podcast. Make sure you subscribe at Shortstop Ball, at _Braves on Twitter. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you are new. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.